Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for joining this afternoon. It's great to be kicking off the first One Connect webinar of 2026. So today we're going to be looking at the NetSuite new release 2026.1. So presenters today, so myself, I'm Emma, I'm one of the key account managers here at Bluebridge One. And shortly I'm going to be handing over to Ian, who I'm sure most of you attending, you've probably attended some of the sessions before. He's going to be going through the new release with us today. So yeah, just before we start, we're going to be touching on the new release approach, so how Bluebridge One approaches each new release and how we go through and pinpoint the key areas that we want to bring to your attention. We're going to be having a look at the highlights and things to watch out for. And then there's a small section on value adds as well. We're going to be doing things a little bit different as well. We're going to be putting a few polls in this one. So it'd be great if you guys can interact with those polls and just give us a bit more information about what you're kind of excited to be seeing from this new release. Also, we've got Hendrik, who's going to be in the chat if you've got any questions. So please feel free to pop those in the Q&A box as we go through. Now, just before we start, if you could take a moment as well, just to read the safe harbor statement. Thank you. Lovely. Thank you very much. And Ian, I think it's over to you.
Yeah. So I'll just run through a few introductory slides like we always do, just because there'll be a few new people on the call. So as Bluebridge One, we have a Centre of Excellence team. And so twice a year when we have these new releases come out, as a team, we go through and we try and understand where the value can come from those new releases. So you might have met some or all of these people as part of working with Bluebridge, and we each have certain areas of centers of excellence. So these are the people that kind of focus in on those functional or technical areas of the business, and they kind of assess what's coming out, both in the new releases, but just generally in the market as well. Just to just to look at what values we can bring to our customers. And just in terms of the new release process, again, I'll just go through these because I go through them each time. There is different phases, so most of you are probably on 2026.1 already, and when you are ready, when you are building up to having the upgrade, you'll have access to a new release preview account as well. And that's something that's easy to forget, but you do have to opt into it. So each time, if you want to look at any of the new features in a dedicated copy of your production account, then you can request that through company release preview. And then when you have access, you can go in, you'll see your data, you'll see all of your functionality and customizations and configurations that you've had, and you can try out and enable the new features. So that's quite a valuable thing, but it is a limited time. Once you're on 2026.1, well, within weeks, you'll lose access to that account. So don't use it as a temporary sandbox or anything, because it'll just disappear. Okay, so in terms of what we do for each of the new releases, we do, as I've said, some in-depth analysis using our team of COEs. And then we just look for those values that we see as being most significant for our customers. And using that, we just, for this session, come up with an easy priority scoring that we can share. Just so from your perspective, you can see our view and what we think about some of the highlights, because we want this to be in some way like a consultative engagement list. We don't just want to rattle through, new feature A, B, C. We want to try and kind of give you some idea of what we feel it can be of value and how it can be used as well. So throughout this session, you'll see these bars for each of the new features where we think a 5 is a game changer, 4 a useful improvement, and a 3 one to keep an eye on. So you'll see 3s through this, which don't necessarily mean that we don't think they're any good, but as you would expect, when NetSuite release big new features, they're not going to release it fully fledged at the get-go. They'll start with like a minimum viable product, just with basic functionality, and then we'll expect it to grow over time. And so we mark the 3s with that in mind, which ones are emerging, which ones we see potential in maybe in the future. So that's what you can expect from today. And in terms of what we're going to cover, this is the sort of agenda of business areas that we're going to look at and focus on. There were a lot of enhancements in this release, about 90 odd pages at the last look, because they still keep updating the new release PDF. So it is worth looking at it even now. I looked at it this morning and there are a few new things that I've snuck in here. So around 90 pages, and we're going to go through some of the highlights on supply chain, accounting, sales, system and admin, and then a few technical enhancements. And there's a couple of suite apps to highlight as well. There are some other improvements in other areas. There were some RevRec improvements. From project management perspective, there is quite a good improvement, but it is just the one around editing project tasks where you can do creation and bulk editing now, which is a good improvement. And then on CPQ, there's some enhancements, including an AI assistant, which is something we touched on in the last webinar as to that upcoming. So those are just a few other things, but we'll dive in now and just look at the supply chain side and what we've seen there. So quite a big functionality that's come in is supplier consignment management. And that's quite a common requirement that we see across our base. Just to highlight, though, that it is limited to suppliers at the moment. And there are a couple of other caveats that are important to note, which might change this from a 5 to a 3 for quite a few people. And that you can't enable it with WMS or assembly items. So those are some quite significant caveats there in terms of making use of this. So supplier consignment management is always something that we've been able to do in NetSuite, just using locations and a bit of manual work, etc. So there's always been a way of doing this. And what's good about this approach now is that they've delivered a more native functionality that actually is end-to-end as well. So it's a fully kind of realized bit of functionality because it works across all of the purchase transactions. So that's even including purchase contracts, purchase orders, and on the return side as well in terms of vendor returns. So this consignment option is available on all of those transactions, as it is on the transfers, the fulfillments, because of course eventually you will sell some of this consigned material, and adjustments. So it is, like I say, it is a bit of functionality that works end to end, including for the accounting. So you can see a clear segregation at the point of transaction when something is dealing with a consignment bit of inventory in terms of an asset and cost of sale. And with that as well, because it's all entrenched in there, you can have good reporting and workbooks. So that's the advantage of this process, is the fact that it does give you that kind of end-to-end native view of supplier consignment. And just under the hood, just to show you what transactions and what you might see changed if you did enable this. So on the item record, for anything that you want to use for a consignment, there are two new options now where you set the consignment cost of sale account and the asset account for costs for consignment. On purchase transactions, you'll see a couple of new tick boxes if you're using it. So you'll see a consign checkbox, both at the header level and also at the line level. And then on any inventory impacting transactions, so that'll be fulfillments and adjustments and receipts, you'll have this inventory status that you'll see for consigned goods as well, because you are able to set up not just consigned stock, but just like you can with other inventory, you can set things like damaged consigned stock as well. And I'd say that use of inventory status is probably one of the considerations in terms of adopting this as a feature. If you're using inventory status already, then this would be quite an easy transition to start using this. But if you're not, then you'd have to just look about how you're going to be using inventory status, not just for this purpose, but is there any other reason you might use it? So that's one consideration for using this functionality. But like I said, it's a good feature. I can't say with any evidence that in future it'll be available with WMS and with assemblies. But that would be the typical path. This is definitely one of those examples where it's let's get the full end-to-end process out there, and then let's add things as we progress and as we grow and understand how people are using it. So yeah, that's a very big bit of functionality that's come in now. So then next, this is quite a small one, but it can solve a headache if you've created a headache. It is a case that if you've done something wrong, this can help you get out of that a bit easier than previously. And that's around inbound shipments. Because inbound shipments are quite powerful, but they do create a lot of transactions, because you might have a whole load of purchase orders that you've receipted in one go because they're all tied into the receipt of one inbound shipment. And there's this new inbound reversal function that's available. So you can search for that, and then you can really just go and undo something that you've done. So that's really all there is to this feature. It's just something that you can use just to, like I say, just to back out of a situation if something's been received in error. So that's just, an easy saving way. And the last point on this page is the supply planning results workbook. So I think we touched on the supply planning and some of the visibility of that in the last session. So this is if you're using material resource planning. So in NetSuite for planning, you have the options of just reorder points, you could almost call it the more old-fashioned way of time-phased planning, and material resource planning, where you're using planning workbenches, creating planned purchase orders, etc. So there's a lot of data that the MRP process generates, and there's a good dashboard and workbench that you can look at to get a good view of. But what this workbook does is just give you the ability to pivot that data and to spin that data into different views into the way you see it. So it is just a template. So if you go into analytics, you'll see this is one of the options, the supply chain planning results workbook. And if you open that up, then that's what you'll see here. You'll see a screen like this with multiple tabs, and it will show you various aspects of your planning, both from days late, what demand's coming in, what supply is coming in. So you can start to plan things and look at what your planned orders are, look to identify excess inventory and shortages. And you can amend all of this as well. So like I say, this is just a template, but it does give you the right data set and starting point where you can start to build other views from a planning perspective, just to help out with that planning. So those are some of the core supply chain enhancements. And on top of that, as we've seen quite frequently, are some changes to the mobile device as well. So this is specifically for NetSuite's WMS module. And like I say, we've seen enhancements on this probably quite a lot in the last 4 or 5. With this release, the focus is more on just bringing additional functionality to the handset. And I think with all of these points that you'll see, it is a case of whether that's really appropriate for your workflow within the warehouse environment. So as I'm going through these, don't think that these are going to be default all turned on and your pickers are going to run amok or anything. These are all options that you can enable, but nevertheless, there may be some scenarios where some of these are appropriate. And the first one is zero quantity picks. So you can mark all done or mark all partial when picking an order, and it will close off all of the zero and partial pick lines for that order that were in the wave. So it gives a way of kind of wrapping up a pick task that was in the wave to just complete it without completing all of the picks that were part of that. What you'll see is, if you turn on the option again, like I say, is this mark all done option when you're working on a pick task. And like I say, that will just close the task off even if you've not fully completed the pick. The other thing you would see, if you've started to partially pick some of the lines, is that you'll see these 3 dots. And again, under there, you'll just get more options. So you've got the option to mark all done or mark partial picks done. So like I said, this is something that you consider, in terms of an operator, do you want to give this functionality, and who do you want to give this functionality to if it is going to benefit the business. Always you'll have a confirmation screen as well. So if any of this is happening, then it will be a confirmation screen to say, you know, are you sure you want to continue? Because not all tasks have been completed for that order. The next one, again, following a similar theme, like I said, this just gives the ability for mobile operator to post the item receipt. So with the mobile device, you would be kind of scanning and staging and receiving items from the handheld. But what this feature does is actually allow you from the handheld to manually create that kind of accounting commitment, that item receipt, where you see that transaction in NetSuite. So it's a button that you would see at the base. And again, similar to the processing of zero quantity picks, this button is available and can be clicked even if you've not fully received the order. So if you've partially received a line or partially received the order, then you'll see this button. And what you'll see if you press it, it will confirm to you what you have received, and then you'll have that post item receipt there, which will then actually process that item receipt there and create the transaction. So then relating to that is the ability to actually capture landed costs on the receipt. And this is just an example of what I mean about enabling these rules and making these sort of functions available. So for this one specifically, there's an option or a rule that set landed cost during receiving. And by enabling that, that's what will make these features available to the mobile device. And what you'll see when doing a receipt is you'll see these options here, the landed cost template if you're using estimated, or the landed cost category and amount if you're using actual. So it gives the operator using the mobile device to do those landed costs at the point of receipt. So they'd either select the estimated cost template, which is maybe more appropriate in this scenario because that's still going to work off set criteria to decide what landed costs get added. Or you could actually put in the category and the landed cost amount as well. And that one I'm not so sure about. I don't know who's connected to that hand, but yeah, whether you would want them to do this is more questionable from my perspective. In some smaller warehouse environments where that one person is able to do this, then that might be all well and good. But yeah, I think certainly the other option could be useful. But with estimated landed costs, you can generally automate that process anyway. We've done that a few times in the past. But nevertheless, to have it there is a good option, like I say, because for some operations this would be appropriate. Okay, and then one last one, and this is more around the work order environment. This just allows you to kind of line up and prepare a work order or a line for a job, even if not all components are available. So you might have some components for the work order that aren't available yet. Through the mobile device now, if you're picking from there, this just means that you can kind of part pick a work order, and that you'll see the option to pick that work order here. Because traditionally you might have the option to pick only for a fully committed work order, in which case the work order wouldn't even appear on the screen to be able to pick. But if you inactivate this, there's another rule that will be to show a notice for back order quantities when you're picking. So it'll allow you to pick where not all quantities are available, but it will just highlight that, you know, are you sure you want to continue, because there are back ordered quantities that won't be included in the pick. So those are all the mobile device improvements. And like I say, we have seen quite a raft of warehouse improvements over the last year and a half, maybe even 2.5 years. And we're just going to kick off our first poll now, which we will be through the webinar platform. And it's just to gauge some information as to where you are with your warehousing. So if you are kind of a business that has warehouses, you know, within 2026, what are the improvement priorities that you're focusing on? So within the poll, you'll see these options in terms of inventory visibility, operational efficiency, space optimization. Customer satisfaction is more about, you know, accuracy of what you're picking and shipping. And then compliance and traceability, maybe more for food and bev and that sort of thing, where you're looking at FIFO, looking at traceability of lot numbers and things like that. So yeah, it'd be interesting to get some feedback just to know where your priorities are from a warehousing perspective. Like I say, we're not focusing on any particular system here. You might be using a 3PL or another system, but it's just be useful to know, and we can share the results of that poll as well if you can contribute. That'd be great.
Operational efficiency seems to be the most highly voted for at the minute.
Okay, we'll just give it another 30 seconds and then we'll move on to the next section.
Perfect, thank you.
So was that operational efficiency? Was that the top one? Yeah.
That looks like the top one, yeah.
Yeah.
70%.
Yeah, it's interesting. Thanks everyone for that. Okay, so we're going to move on from supply chain now. So another pretty significant feature, one worth kind of considering where it might fit within the business, and that's the new pricing features in NetSuite. So the aim of this and where the value could come is just giving that greater flexibility to sales to sell, but without the overhead of, you know, masses and masses of different pricing to manage within the system. It's never easy to do this in some regards, but to do both, I should say. But hopefully this new feature could provide some more options for doing it. And what it centers around is this addition of price rules, and also which hopefully will be quite a popular one, is the fact that now you can have cost plus based pricing. And the process that's used for this is very intuitive, actually. The way they've implemented this just makes sense. So it's not a big deal to understand what this could do and how to implement it, to be honest. I'll start with the cost plus side. So price levels are something that everyone's quite familiar with. And the new field really is the pricing method. So at the pricing method on the price level now, you can set as cost plus. And there are two options to what you can base it on. You can base it off of the current, or you can base it off the average cost. And I'll explain why I corrected myself there. You can base it off an average cost for the item. And the other option is to base it off a cost for pricing, which is a new field that's on the item record. And this is very small on here, but essentially, if you look at an item record now, under that kind of pricing tab, you'll see a cost for pricing option there to populate that. And so that means that you can decide what cost you want to base the pricing on. And also on that page, just as an aside, you'll see that the pricing screen has changed as well, because now instead of just like a discount percentage, you see price level, price rule, pricing method, as well as the quantity schedules as well. So the way this works with the cost plus, if you're using cost for pricing, then when you come in and edit an item record and you set that cost for pricing, that will then update any of the price levels that use that cost plus method, if that makes sense. But it is something where natively at the moment, you would go in, edit that value, hit save, and then it would come up. With average pricing, you would still need to come in and edit it, and then you'll see a refresh this item page. So if you look at the video, the release video for this functionality, that's what it describes and how to interact with this. And it is a fair point that you don't necessarily want to always automatically go through all these things. Example might be, especially if it's off average price, for example, you might have just expedited by air a small quantity that ticks your average price up a couple of pence or cents. You wouldn't necessarily want that then to adjust your pricing by the same amount or a percentage of the same amount. So having that human intervention is generally important, but doing it this manual way, as you can probably imagine, would be quite long-winded. There is a bulk process that they have suggested, and that's going back into the price level. So I didn't highlight it at the time when I showed that price level, but there is a little tick box underneath the pricing method, which I think it's already there for existing price levels, where you can update all the prices for this price level. So if you were going to go into the price level, tick that box and then hit save, it would also update all of those prices for you if you wanted to reflect a later average cost, for example. So that is one of the bulk methods available. I think where you can, what I really think is, if you're using average pricing, usually that would probably be reserved maybe for things like intercompany prices, because if you're working maybe in a consumer goods environment where you're selling to resellers, etc., you would want to use that other option, the kind of cost for pricing option, because that's more controllable then. And this I could see being enhanced, and even if it's something we could do, where you could enhance it, where you've got a suitelet or a screen that could show all the items where there's been a change in average cost over a certain kind of delta. If it's over like 5% change, it will show you that list, and then you can select which ones to update the pricing for. We've done similar for a couple of customers to that before, but again, to have some of the native functionality in here will just help support that process and will help build those sorts of things easier. So yeah, so that's how I think this functionality about new pricing could come in, just for around the cost plus side. So then to move on to price rules. So these are new to the system, and price rules are really kind of new records that lay out what price level to apply for certain customers. If I just bring up the list, certain customers or all customers, specific or all items. So you can set up a price rule that kind of is for a specific customer and a specific set of items or whatever it might be. And that first one there is quite a big one as well. So from a date perspective, you can have this as a always effective price rule, or you can have a price rule which has a specific start and end date. So you could use this for short-term kind of price change. And if you're currently using the effective date pricing suite app, then that's similar to that in a way. So I'd say if you're using that, then price rules, you might already get everything you need from your current solution. But even so, it might be worth just looking at these price rules to see if they do offer anything different in terms of the way that you manage them. But essentially, yeah, this can be used not just for setting out a general rule for a customer, but also temporary rules for a customer. And also, just to add, there is a preference in the system, because of course you might end up with multiple price rules that are available at the same time. And so there's a preference in the system that says, should you use like the lowest price or should you use the highest price? I think those are the two options. So that's just another consideration as well. But yeah, I think adoption of this is worth considering. Every business does tend to have its own entrenched business pricing models, but these tools could help make management of them easier, because the alternative tends to be using kind of custom item price lists. But what you wouldn't want to do is just replace that with thousands of pricing rules, because I would imagine the maintenance and the management would be just as heavy. Because the other thing to consider is you can't import these price rules. But there might be certain sections, certain channels where these price rules are quite useful and effective, because they do everything in one set. So it's yeah, I imagine this will be quite a useful feature, and certainly one to consider. But yeah, just to reiterate, if you are using the effective date pricing app, this isn't replacing that. That isn't being defunct or anything. That's still going to be that's a perfectly adequate tool to use if you're using it at the moment. Okay, so next one around sales is intelligent recommendations. This has been around for a little while, but it's popped on here just because of a few more options. So if you are using intelligent recommendations, then you can now see display name, unit price, quantity available. So it will just give sales a bit better visibility when it's suggesting items. The use case for this is really more if you're using the UI to enter sales transactions. That's really the use case for this. But yeah, to have that extra information there is just a useful addition. So that's everything on sales. So now we'll move on to accounting, where there were quite a few enhancements that I'm going to share, a couple of pages worth. The first is really for people who have one world and have multiple subsidiaries, and it's the ability just to view elimination journal entry sources. So it just helps with that task of understanding where some of those eliminations have come from. And what you have now on the elimination journals is you have just an extra column here where you can see where the source transactions are. So when there is an elimination, you can click on that source and then it will bring up a journal detail of everything that contributed to that line on the elimination. So it's a very useful drill down from a transaction to transaction basis, but it is very much at a transaction to transaction basis. So what NetSuite have also done is provide a data set. So this again is in the analytics tool within NetSuite. It's not a full kind of template workbook like was the case with the MRP, the planning one. This is just the data set, but you can use that and you'll see all of those fields available from in terms of what the eliminations are and what the source lines are. So for things like AP and AR eliminations, where you might have quite a high volume, then something like this might be a better way to digest that information. And with analytics, of course, it does give you a way of then just having different views, adding different filters on the fly and that kind of thing. So the combination of those two things should just help kind of work through those eliminations, whether that's for audit or for a specific close task that you want to do for the period. So that's useful if that's something that you have to endure every month. The next one is a small change, but is a relief, is a good one. It is only really from a Europe, UK sort of perspective mostly, because it is based around the bank feeds engine, where you're using SaltEdge to bring in bank transactions. But previously, you couldn't set the time or the frequency, but most importantly, probably the time when those imports happened every day. So it could happen like at 11 a.m. or 1 p.m. Whereas a good thing now is that you can set the schedule for those banks because you might want to do it at different frequencies for different accounts. And you can edit the current ones, which is good news. So this isn't just for if you're adding new bank accounts, or bank feeds. You can edit the existing feed as well. So whether you're adding or editing, what you'll see now is a screen, and at the bottom of that screen you'll have a tab called Import Schedule. So you can set the unit of time. You can select that to hour, day, week, or month, and then you set repeat every. So it could be every 6 hours in this example. And you can set the scheduled import time as well for when you want that to happen. There's also a time zone, which is just off the page, but that, I can't imagine you setting that to anything other than your own time zone, to be honest. But yeah, that gives you that flexibility to set these schedules up, which was missing before. And I think that would be, like I say, it's a relatively small thing, but it will just give you that bit of flexibility, and you'll have a clearer understanding of what that cutoff point is of what you're looking at in your system. So I think from that perspective, it is a good change. Alongside it, there, if you look at the match bank data page, there is a refresh option on there, but that is limited to, you can't just keep button mashing that every 5 minutes or anything. It would just not do anything. It is limited to 60 minutes. So if you've had a bank refresh within the last 60 minutes, it will just ignore that button press. I imagine though that you can, most times setting up these schedules should be adequate. But on the rare occasion where you know a specific bank transaction's come in and you want it to get it reconciled, then you do have that refresh option as well. So that's quite useful. Okay, so then on to the other area of accounting where they've all kind of come around a theme, even on that previous slide. The lot of these enhancements on this release sort of center around aiding in financial close. And this first one is a new dashboard that you can pop onto your own role dashboard, and it is something you'd have to enable. And there are a couple of other features that relate to it called exception management and narrative reporting, and I'll touch on those after this as well. And it'll be interesting to see how this develops, but essentially you can add this closed dashboard to your dashboard, as you can imagine, this portlet onto your dashboard, I should say. And it just gives you an overview of what period you're looking at, and it gives you a bit of information on some of the exceptions that have happened, as well as an overall kind of transaction status. So that's really where its main focus is, if I just zoom into there. So it's looking at things you might want to tidy up before you close. So an example could be invoices pending approval. So on this dashboard, it will show you, as it is here, you've got 3 invoices still pending approval. And if that was key to kind of finalizing and getting as much of that cleared out as possible before closing, because of course, if it's revenue for this quarter or this period, then it's good to get them approved before the quarter or period. Then you can click on that and you can see what they are. You can approve them from here, but that might depend on your approval process, because approval might just need to go through another mechanism. But at least you'd be able to see what those transactions were, and then have the discussion as to whether any of them could be approved before you close the books for the previous period. So that's quite a useful feature. And like I say, the other part of that dashboard is looking at exceptions, which is something that was released late last year. It's AI driven. It's another feature that you can enable from enable features, and it shows you the potential transaction errors as well as potential missing transactions. So it's really looking at patterns across your history and seeing if and just highlighting anything that it sees that's untypical. And you can see here you've got filters along the top, and it also shows you an overall expected amount where it's saying, you know, I'm highlighting, you know, this much potential variance over what you're expecting. So it's really a prompt to look at some of the points that are raised here. And if you look into any one of these, it will kind of explain in a pop-up, you know, why it's highlighted this as a potential exception. So it will tell you the detected amount versus what it's seen on past transactions and what the potential impact of it could be. There's nothing then it will automatically do. It won't do any automatic creation, but it just gives you a space to manage these exceptions. So you can mark it as not needed, or you can mark it to say, yes, that was an error, I've corrected it, and now I'm resolving that exception. And as you saw on the first dashboard, it kind of shows you how many of those open exceptions that you've got. So the thing to note on this is that it is globally available, and you'll hear that it's globally available. But on Suite Answers, it does still say there is some limits to the release. It is does very much need, as you can imagine, history to be effective, because if you've only got 1 or 2 months worth of history on the system, then it's not really going to be very effective. So if it is a feature, it is a feature that's just worth seeing how it performs. It's not an intrusive feature. It's just really a reporting feature that tracks these things. So you can try it. And if you wanted to do that, but you don't see that option in the enable features, then you can contact the account managers, and they can kind of contact NetSuite to see if there's a valid reason, or whether it's just something that can be enabled for you. So yeah, if you don't see it, that would be the course of action, because like I say, it is something that could potentially help with just identifying some of the errors on some of the common transactions that you have, particularly if they're regular and consistent. That would be the scenario where this is of most use, I'd see. So that's the other area that NetSuite have brought in and combined with this dashboard. And the final one is narrative reporting, which in terms of this headline of narrative insights, this isn't just limited to accounting. Actually, this is something you're going to see across all types of reporting, whether it be inventory, sales, or otherwise. And the narrative reporting is only at the moment available in the US and Canada, and don't know when that will be rolled out. But hopefully, as soon as we know, then we'll be able to share that. And like I said, oddly, it does say it's a prerequisite to enabling the period close, but I was able to activate the period close without this narrative reporting, and it seemed to work okay. So the benefit of the narrative reporting is, as you can see, so the example here, this is an AR aging summary underneath. That's the standard AR aging report. And what you can do is just bring out an AI summary of that report to use for management reports or otherwise. So it just gives you that narrative context of the data that you're looking at. So yeah, so a lot of focus on this release around accounting and period closes. So so we thought we'd kind of bring up another poll now, which is just focused on that. So this will really just be for, well, it'd be for the accounts people in the room, but if you're not from accounts, if you've heard what accounts moan about every month when they're trying to close, you can equally contribute to the poll as well, because this is an interesting one, because it is always difficult to close, and it might be because of some business specific aspects, but alternatively, you know, a lot of these things are difficult even with NetSuite. So it would be interesting just to know from the attendees what people see as being, you know, their greatest challenge. So it is only a single option in closing a period in NetSuite. That would just be interesting to see. I think, Emma, if you're...
I've already activated it.
So we'll give you a minute to vote on that.
An approved transaction seems to be getting quite a few votes at the minute.
Okay, so that would be well answered potentially then with that dashboard, closed dashboard. Like I say, we've not used it in anger ourselves yet. You really need the right data to be able to do that. So yeah, that would be worth seeing if that at least helps identifying it. Doesn't solve the work in getting them approved from people. I think that's maybe the harder than actually just getting them approved, is actually getting people to approve them. But at least from a status perspective, that would give you the status of them.
Yeah, and as Ian mentioned, obviously, if you're looking at anything like this, and you can't see it switched on in your account and you need it to be enabled, just reach out to either myself or Esther, who might look after your account, because we can help to get that switched on as well. Lovely. All right, I'll publish the results now. Thank you, guys.
Excellent, thanks.
Perfect.
So yeah, so that's everything on finance. We've just got a few more areas now to cover from the new release. And next one is just on some of the systems and administration side. So this is for administrators mainly. This top one certainly is. So there was a very small thing in the new release buried away, which is NetSuite login notifications. But what it could do is just give all users visibility of key activities or updates in the account. So if an admin wants to almost like broadcast a notice to all users that are logging in, then this is what you could use for that. It is intended more for regulatory compliance, I think, so that, you know, by entering this system, you acknowledge that you've been trained, that kind of thing. Is probably what it's mainly intended for use for. But I do see a potential use case for using it for just general notifications. So you have to enable it as a feature, which seemed odd actually. And then you go into enable features. It's under the access section of the company options of enable features towards the bottom. And when you enable it, then on the company information page, you see this login information here. No notification here. So if it's blank, nothing happens, no one gets a prompt. But if you put information here, then that'll then bring that up next time that person logs in. It was far more complicated than it should have been to work all that out. There wasn't much help, but hopefully that's, if you want to use that brief summary is enough. So yeah, so you enable the feature under the company page, and then you'll see it in the company information page to be able to put the text in. I've put an example here of just announcing that fixed assets are going to be deployed, but equally, maybe a more relevant example is something like a sandbox refresh. So you could say, we're going to refresh the sandbox next week. If you've got anything in the sandbox, do what you need to do, that kind of thing. So it could be just an easy way of broadcasting. There's no options, there's no filters. It is a broadcast to all, but nevertheless, it could be something that's just a useful thing to help admins just say what's going on with the NetSuite system. The second one is MCP capabilities. So MCP was something that came out last year. So this is MCP Server, which allows you to, through tools like Claude, drive analytics using your NetSuite account data. So it's really easy to set up, something like 3 steps, and then you're away and off and running. In this latest release, what's changed is that they've just expanded some of the options. So there's ways of querying custom reports, subsidiary filters, and multi-currency. So it's probably a relatively small update, but it is nevertheless just showing that continued work on that MCP server facility. That'd be an interesting poll as well, see how many people are using it actually, but you didn't go mad. And then a couple of others that came in a little later, as I was saying at the start, because there were a few other things that came up as later announcements that were included in the new release. One of them is unlimited sandbox refreshes. So up to now, you have had a limit with most accounts, unless you bought an upgrade, of 12 a year, 6 a year. I can't remember now. But the good thing is now you just one less thing to keep track of. I don't think we've had many customers that have ever exceeded it, but it's just, like I say, it's just one less thing to worry about now. You can just refresh and refresh. There's no limit, and there's no change needed to what sandbox accounts you have or anything like that. I think this is carrying forward. And then one final one, which I literally just added yesterday. Again, this is really for admins just to be aware of, is that you can now do CSV imports for deposits and refunds, and that might provide a simpler process for bringing on transactions, whether that's because of some downtime on an integration from a third-party source, or bringing on a new channel, whatever it might be. It just means you've got that option now to bring that data in using an import, whereas previously you would have had to have used a Soligo tool or something like that to do it, because they are more complicated, because they can apply to other transactions. So they are more complicated transactions, but that just came up like I say, I just saw that pop into the release notes yesterday for that. So that was a good latest addition. So then just a couple more in terms of admin, and these are more towards the core of the product, really. We've been saying it for the last 3 or 4 releases, but it's now ended, the support for netsuite.com. So this is just one of the data sources that you could use. As of, if you're on 2026.1 now, you can't use it. So yeah, that's just the end of that story, really. The second one, multiple sessions, is something that we spoke about on 2025.2, and they just added a bit more control and governance on them, I think, now. So they've made it so those multiple sessions have to be activated by an admin, and they must be using 2FA. And multiple sessions is where I gave this scenario last time, so I struggled to see a use case. But if you're like a warehouse person and you're wandering around with an iPad and you've got your desktop as well, it means you can be logged in on both. It's that kind of thing. So you can be logged in multiple locations, essentially. So they've just added this as an extra enhancement for security purposes, no doubt. Okay, so that's everything from the new release. Just a couple more updates now, and that's just around some Suite apps that have been recently announced, which are worth sharing. The first one is NetSuite connector. It is the UK only. It is only available in the UK at the moment, and it is actually not through Suite App Store. It's through the Microsoft Marketplace. So if you're using Outlook and you're on the marketplace for Microsoft, you can get this Outlook for connector. There's a bit of a history with Outlook connections in NetSuite. There used to be a connector. There's also some third-party options from Celigo and a couple of other providers, I think. So there are options out there, but they all aim to do similar things. This one specifically, it's all about capturing those customer touch points, saving emails, meetings, keeping that activity history complete and up to date in NetSuite, getting it on the right records, and it works on Windows and Mac as well. So so yeah, like I say, it's not something through, not strictly speaking, a Suite app from NetSuite. It is on the Microsoft Marketplace, but I think a lot of customers have been interested in having an Outlook connector to kind of sync that data up, that type of data up. But like I said, if this one doesn't look like it's the way to go, there are other options. And then the last one is sales order renewals, and this is a very basic renewal process. So I'd say it's repeated sales orders is probably a more accurate term. Or if you've used memorized transactions, then it's more of an enhanced version of that. So it's a Suite app that just lets you create a sales order, and then if you want that to be a renewing sales order, you can set kind of what pricing to use on that renewed sales order and things like that. So if you have repeated sales or a very, very, very basic kind of contract or subscription system, then this might be worth having a look at. But don't expect contract renewals and suite billing. You know, it's going to be just very bare bones. And like I say, probably where to pitch it is just a little above just using a memorized transaction for a sales order. But nevertheless, there are some scenarios where this might just be a very minor channel within your business, and you just want something basic to go off and do this. So there might be a good purpose for it. Excellent. So I've gone through everything there. We will come back just as a summary and do a final poll on which of these features were most useful. But for now, I'll just pass back to Emma just to go through a few other points and licensing points.
Hello. Thank you, Ian. I'm conscious of time. There's 2 minutes to whiz through these things, but I'll make it as quick as possible. So if you just go to the next slide, just to highlight again, just around the different user types. We've historically had the general access and employee center users, but there are now CRM users WMS users and view and approve user roles. So if you do have any questions around these, please feel free to reach out and we can have a look at your licensing and if any of these would be suitable for your business. Just to highlight again around the learning support path, so this is something that I think is often overlooked with some of our customers. It's a really great addition to any business, really, because this is a company-wide learning path. Really, it's there to enable your end users. It's subscription based. There's lots and lots of different courses depending on role and area of the business, and it's also it's an online learning platform, but there's also webinars. And if you just pop onto the next slide, Ian, I think one of the things that I think is really great about this is that you also get a kind of dedicated learning support consultant as part of the Learning Cloud Support Pass, so they can then offer advice on courses and webinars that would be suitable depending on where your end user are looking at upskilling. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, we don't usually need an hour. That just shows how much is in.
I know.
That shows how much great stuff is in. We'll see if we can squeeze this in. So, you know, as the key takeaways, I've just listed on the screen here some of the big functionality that we've seen, and I think there's a few big ones on there. So just as a final poll, we thought we would just ask again, just because it's an interesting insight, which of these areas you see as potentially bringing value for your business, because it's not often you get that opportunity to get that feedback. So it'd be great to just have that back in terms of understanding what value you're getting from each of these new releases. So yeah, if that poll's up and running now, that'd be great.
Yeah, that's up and running. Yeah, I think particularly around the enhancements in WMS, there's, I mean, every one of these new release webinars, we're seeing more and more coming through there, and definitely exciting stuff around that financial close dashboard as well, where we're often seeing customers asking for enhancements in that area. So
yeah, should we go through the final slides while we're doing that?
We can do. We're just getting some results through now. Perfect. Yeah. So as I mentioned before, look, if there's anything that kind of piques your interest out of this release, or any features that you need support with having enabled, please feel free to reach out to myself or Esther if she currently looks after your account. Or if you're not sure, please reach out to me and I'll be able to direct you to the right person. And then just onto the last slide. So we are currently working through our 2026 schedule for the One Connect webinars, but just to highlight some of the areas that we're going to be looking at over the next couple of months. So there's going to be a focus on supply chain, more of a deep dive there. We're going to be looking at the financial close best practice. So that links quite well to some of the stuff we've been talking about today. HR and people management solutions. So we're going to be taking a deeper dive into NetSuite suite people, but then also what other options are out there as well. And AI, that's obviously a big one that everyone's talking about at the minute, AI in NetSuite and beyond. And then later on into the year, we'll be looking more into procurement and advanced procurement. And then you might be seeing a few more kind of quick wins, shorter webinars, tips and tricks, that kind of thing that we're going to hopefully be sharing with our customers as well over the coming months. Before I close out, I'll just publish the results of this poll so everyone can see. They should be published now. Yeah, thank you so much for attending today. Hopefully there was lots of information in there. I know we've run over a little bit, but as I said, if you've got any questions, please feel free to reach out and we'll be happy to help. Thank you again for your time, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.